Hi, everyone. They asked us to actually stand here on the cross, but that's going to be a very difficult thing for me because I really can't stand still. But listening to Aurora and what she said about oil and gas industry and this addiction kind of like trend, that makes me a recovered addict because I started my career in oil and gas industry. So I started my career as a field engineer in the biggest oil and gas service company in the world, Lindholmen, where I traveled and worked in 12 countries in the world. And I actually logged oil and gas wells to find oil and gas rigs. So how brave am I today talking about sustainability on this stage? That's a different story. But okay, so let's start. We're talking about blockchain for a sustainable world today. And before that, I want all of us to watch this video. This is going to be 2 to 3 minutes video, but I think it's necessary for all of us to watch this before I talk about anything.
People are talking a lot about inequality these days, about the fact that the richest 1% have so much more than everybody else. But most of the focus seems to be on the United States. And it strikes me that the same story needs to be told about global inequality too. So I did some research, and this is what I found from reliable sources like the UN. It turns out that while the US is totally out of whack, things are actually way worse for the planet as a whole. Let's start with this graph. A perfectly even distribution of wealth among all living people, with everyone divided into 5 equal groups. Now, let's show how much each group actually has. Shocking, right? 80% of the world's people barely have any wealth. It's hard to even see them on the chart. Meanwhile, the richest 2%, they have more wealth than half of the rest of the world. Let's look at this chart another way. Let's take the whole world's population, all 7 billion of us, and reduce it to just a representative 100 individuals. Here they are, poorest people on the left, richest people on the right. Now let's show how the world's total wealth, roughly $223 trillion, is distributed. The vast majority have practically nothing. Nothing with which to educate their children, nothing with which to pay for basic medicines. While the richest 1%, they've accumulated 43% of our world's wealth. The bottom 80%, meanwhile, that's 8 out of every 10 people, have just 6% between them. But even this doesn't really show how extreme things have become. The richest 300 people on Earth have the same wealth as the poorest 3 billion. So the number of people it takes to fill a mid-sized commercial aircraft have more wealth than the populations of India, China, the US, and Brazil combined. We can also see this difference geographically, with a huge and growing gap between a few rich places versus the majority of the world. For most of history, things were much more equal. 200 years ago, rich countries were only 3 times richer than poor countries. By the end of colonialism in the 1960s, they were 35 times richer. Today, they're about 80 times richer. Rich countries try to compensate for this by giving aid to poor countries, about $130 billion each year. That's a lot of money. So then why does the wealth gap keep getting bigger? One reason I found is that large corporations are taking more than $900 billion out of poor countries each year through a form of tax avoidance called trade mispricing. On top of this, each year poor countries are paying about $600 billion in debt service to rich countries on loans that have already been paid off many times over. And then there's the money that poor countries lose from trade rules imposed by rich countries to get access to more resources and cheaper labor. Economists from the University of Massachusetts calculate that this costs poor countries about $500 billion a year. Altogether, that's more than $2 trillion that flows from some of the poorest parts of the world to the richest. Every year. Rich governments like to say they're helping poor countries develop. But who's developing who here? This makes me think that there's something wrong with the basic rules of the global economy. It can't be okay that the wealth of our planet is becoming so concentrated in the hands of such a tiny number of people. The only reasonable response, it seems to me, And our only hope is to change the rules.
So, why did I want all of us to see this? It's because sustainability is not only about climate, right? Majority of what we heard today was around climate, around energy consumption. But that is not the only thing. We have 17 sustainable development goals. What do we actually do for the rest of them? So today, we're going to look at the blockchain technology at brief. We're going to look at the ecosystem of innovation with blockchain, and how does blockchain help SDGs, and the energy consumption criticized against blockchain that we keep hearing a lot. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is a digital distributed ledger. Therefore, it's decentralized. And therefore, now that it's decentralized, it eliminates intermediaries. It's a peer-to-peer network. Because it's decentralized and distributed, all the ledger that is stored at every node is updated real-time, synchronized real-time records. It's immutable. That means in blockchain, you can only make future. You cannot change the past. And all the transactions in blockchain are cryptographically sealed. And they're chronological and time-stamped. So listening to all the listeners, the good thing about being the last speaker is because you can, take points on all the speakers, right? Nicholas talked about transparency and track and tracing. Eric talked about gaps between those who have and don't, and stupid systems and trustworthiness. Axel talked about circular value chain. Anna Honor asked, how can I, as a customer, follow my batteries and the promises that I am given, right? How can I track that? Marcus mentioned trustful collaborations. Linda talked about track and trace of waste. And actually, our police officers talked about connecting the gang members, right? And then I was listening to all of them, and then I look back here, and I see a lot of those words here, track and tracing. Actually connecting the gang members through a digital ID on blockchain. Trustfulness, because it's a trustless operation. Blockchain is a trustless network. And that does not mean you do not have to trust. You do not have to trust a single central authority. You don't trust the bank, central bank. You don't trust a central government. You don't trust a central entity. You trust the network, the distributed network. So a lot of what we talked today as challenges towards a more sustainable world, I can see them in blockchain. Of course, that's because I'm a fan of blockchain. You might not think so, but at least I do. So how does blockchain work? And to make it simple, it's a network, it's a distributed network. Let's imagine we're all part of blockchain, and I want to make a transaction with Asif. I send out my broadcast, I broadcast my request to the whole network, and the network, through some sort of consensus mechanism, which is a mechanism through which the network validates or rejects a transaction. Through that consensus, agrees to the transaction is recorded, stored in a block is added to the chain. So that is a very simple explanation of how blockchain works. But we have different generations to blockchain. We have the evolution of blockchain is blockchain generation 1.0, which was basically Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies, right? The whole blockchain hype started with Bitcoin. And it was all about the crypto itself. In blockchain 1.0, you could not use the values of this network to build any application, right? It was a peer-to-peer financial system, financial empowering system. And it started with a consensus called proof of work, which we will talk about towards the end of the presentation today. But later, Ethereum came to the picture. Ethereum was the blockchain that now allowed companies, individuals, to build all those sexy applications that we talk about, right? Decentralized apps, dApps we call them. That, we eliminate intermediaries, we make everything more transparent, we make everything more decentralized, and now Ethereum was allowing us to do that. And then eventually, blockchain 3.0, that now gives more functionality, plus introduces other consensus mechanisms rather than proof of work. Proof of work is the bad mechanism, is the one that uses energy consumption, has a lot of energy consumption, but of course the most decentralized in blockchain concept as well. So according to blockchain experts, is the best. According to society, is the worst. So therefore, then the latest generation is a generation that is really bringing that democratization to the society. Also bringing more consensus mechanisms, more algorithms that were greener, that were not really consuming as much energy, and focusing maybe on sustainability a little bit. But also looking at the ecosystem of the innovation, it started with cryptographic innovations, then we moved to layer 1, which is layer 1 software infrastructure, which was reducing the required crypto skills to program and reduce the risk of faulty crypto. Then layer 2, which was bringing all this DeFi and dApps applications, etc. Then we introduced hardwares. Hardwares come into the picture, especially when it comes to mining. We will learn about them later. And then governance and business models. People started to build business models, innovative business models on the concept of blockchain. And then today, what we're seeing is innovations in regulations, because blockchain is a very infrastructural technology that changes a lot of things that we are so used to and are so regulated. And also introduces a lot of other opportunities that we have no regulations for, right? So this integration into regulations is what is happening a lot today. So coming back to the sustainable development goals, what I wanted to know was what was the root cause of this, right? What is the root cause for poverty? It's centralization of wealth. Wealth is so centralized. What is the root cause to hunger? Is lack of efficiency in food distribution. Food distribution, but of course, wealth centralization is in a way as well, right? So the root cause of each, if you look at, is either the supply chain has a problem, or there is a centralization in place, or there is lack of efficiency or lack of transparency. For example, when it comes to peace, justice, and strong institutions, centralization and lack of transparency is a problem. Centralized government. I was born in Iran myself. So I can relate to that very much. Centralized power, lack of transparency, it definitely increases injustice. Or partnerships for businesses, again, centralizations, lack of transparency, lack of efficiency in the systems. So a lot of root causes of these problems are actually the key attributes of blockchain technology, right? They are the characters of blockchain technology. And looking at areas that blockchain technology can actually help the most, there are 4 major contributions through blockchain to the world. One is record keeping, and that is about the immutability. You cannot really change past. Everything is recorded, and that's it. You can only make future. One is security. One is digital currencies or cryptocurrencies. And one is the smart contracts. Smart contracts, which is, any contract that we have today, but written on codes, right? So these 4 major contributions can now bring a lot of applications, starting from all the way, the application of democratization of finance industry, to healthcare record keeping, to food distribution, supply chain record, track and tracing and record keeping, transparency, etc. And to give you some examples, there are applications today that are using blockchain technology and specifically addressing SDGs. One is, for example, the zero hunger, that is distribution of food vouchers, right? Or climate, for SDG 13, climate action, there is low carbon tea project in Kenya. There are multiple projects that are focusing on SDGs using blockchain technology. But how can blockchain now say that, okay, now I want to address SDGs, what are the potential impacts that I can have as blockchain technology? Is decentralized application overtake centralized ones? That is one major contribution. And when applications are developed for financial inclusion, I mean, we're talking about financial inclusion, a lot of you sitting today here living in one of the most developed countries might have not faced it, might have not seen how costly it is to transact money if you're doing a business in a developing country and you have a partner in a developed country. How long it will take the transaction, how timely it is, how costly it is. But this is a big problem when it comes to developing countries. Or cryptocurrencies replacing fiat money. That can be one contribution. Blockchain becoming the new internet. Efficiency increases in international digital transactions, in the remittance, etc. But it's much easier said than done, right? I can ramble about all the great points of blockchain until tomorrow morning, but of course it's not that easy, right? Every contribution comes with its own pain points. When we talk about decentralized applications overtaking centralized, that means people have to see centralized applications as a threat. That is the first thing, the mindset change. People have to understand when everything is amazing with AI, with IoT and everything, but as long as it is centralized, it's dangerous. As long as it is centralized, it's volatile. It's in risk of data manipulation. Therefore, it's in risk of corruption. So people have to understand this. They have to understand this concept. And also, blockchain has to become much faster and greener than today when we're talking about scalability, right? Of course, blockchain is scalable enough for many applications today, but maybe not scalable enough for replacing finance centralized systems today, for example. The blockchain, well, and the theoretical impact would be lower transaction costs, etc. But to be honest, if you want to look at it in huge, big scales globally, it's still unknown because Bitcoin is still the biggest blockchain application in the world up to today. Talking about applications that are developed for financial inclusion, blockchain has, as a tool for financial inclusion, is that mean that creates that democratization, right? Today, a lot of businesses I know in developing countries that are using blockchain-based payment systems, exchanges, cryptocurrencies, etc. But also, there is a big challenge with regulation here, right? Sweden was the first country in the world that decided to adopt blockchain and develop CBDC, or central bank cryptocurrencies, called e-krona, that probably many of you have heard about. But because of lack of regulations, or regulations not being integrated well with the technology, the project is extremely slow. But in general, today about 70% of the banks in the world are actually at least doing something with CBDCs. Efficiency increase in international digital transactions, increasing trade and transport efficiency, and reducing cost, and has a lot of potential in this case. We had a speaker talking about healthcare. Just talking about healthcare supply chain, which would be patient diagnosis all the way to you receiving your care. In Europe alone, annually, we have 10 billion euros spent on double spending, right? And that would be a whole different idea, different scenario if we had our healthcare systems on blockchain. Because you would have your record. First of all, you would own your record, you would own your own data, and you would have access to it at any time, at any point. Cryptocurrencies replacing fiat money. Cryptocurrencies, if you ask me what is the money in the future, because that is one of the questions I always get asked, it's not cryptocurrency from my point of view, it's your data, and it is not even in future, it's even today. So the currency today is still your data. But cryptocurrencies, will they replace fiat money? Duh, they have already. We're just not very well aware of it yet. If you look at how things have changed in the past 1 year, at some point, I started working with blockchain since 2015. In 2016 or 17, if I would have told anyone that I work with blockchain, they would look at me as a drug dealer. Like, she's fraud. But today, people understand that this is a technology that is going to change things. Of course, there are downfalls to it as well. And also blockchain as the internet, as the future internet, I'm going to move fast, but potential unintended consequences are also there. That, environmental impact, Bitcoin, criminal activities, the share of illicit cryptocurrencies that grows, or privacy. Hackers have stolen a lot of money in crypto. They have not hacked blockchain, though. They have hacked your centralized wallets. And that's a whole different thing, because your wallets are off the chain. They are not on the chain. So we don't yet have a case of any hacker attack or hacking Bitcoin as a blockchain itself. Or inequalities. 50% of all Bitcoin addresses hold less than 0.01 Bitcoin. There's a still inequality in holding cryptos as well. And talking about proof of work and proof of stake, the last slides here, you might have heard that blockchain is not sustainable because of the energy consumption, and that is true if it's running on proof of work. And proof of work was the first consensus that involves miners. Every transaction needs to be validated by miners, and when a transaction is broadcasted, all the miners around the world, tens of thousands of them, start solving a very complicated mathematical equation that consumes a lot of energy, and only one of them, which is the first one that solves that, is rewarded. So you can imagine all the energy that is gone to waste. But then proof of stake and all the other consensus after that, they're totally green. They don't use energy. So that criticism was valid up to certain time or for certain applications. But now Ethereum, which is the biggest dApps blockchain, is migrating to proof of stake totally. So that is, and you can see the energy consumption here, comparing. So this is proof of work Bitcoin, proof of work Ethereum, and here almost zero. Proof of stake Ethereum is not even comparable. So the criticism of not being sustainable to generally blockchain is not valid anymore. And last but not least, the technology is as good as human using it. So all the techs are amazing, but are we also as humans? That is something that we probably need to think about. Thank you.